We have a lot of interesting discussions going on around the Utah Jazz on whether or not the Jazz are trying to make a deal. So let's hop right in. We've been telling you that Karis LeVert and frankly anybody on the Indiana Pacers would be a nice addition for the Jazz. Well, in talking about this for the last week or so, we've been reaching out to our network of sources. And we have it on pretty good information that the Jazz did, in fact, try to trade for Karis LeVert. They inquired about picking up LeVert from the Pacers, and they were pretty much told, well, you don't have the assets, and we're pretty far down the road with another club in the NBA. The Pacers were told, who most people think is the Cleveland Cavaliers, but we'll see. But there's two things that should really stand out to you here when we're talking about Jazz making a trade. That is that their first real target was an athletic wing. And, Jake, they didn't have the assets to get that deal done.
Yeah, and this is the conversation that we've been having, and this is what we've told you guys is going to be the challenge, which is, A, you don't have a lot of flexibility money-wise, but then B, it's not like you're loaded with draft picks or good contract situations to move people around. And so everybody wants to come out on the Jazz and be like, well, they could move Bogey, or they could move Joe, or they could move X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But the problem with all of those guys, through no fault of their own, is that they're paid well. And in the NBA, if you want to execute a trade, all the numbers have to be square. You have to level out on both sides, and everything has to add up. So
when you're paying the luxury tax,
yeah,
which the Utah Jazz are, when you're paying the luxury tax, you're pretty much dollar for dollar. Things have to add up. You cannot add salary of any kind. You're really landlocked. And now that you have a lot of these trade deadlines from contracts and trades that were made in the offseason, allowing people to make moves, that's why you're starting to see teams like the Indiana Pacers, frankly, hanging an open for business sign out, saying that, hey, we're ready to make deals. And I think if you're the Utah Jazz, you're smart to be out aggressively looking to improve your roster in December instead of waiting until early February. Because frankly, if you wait until the last couple of days of the deadline, it's going to be very difficult if you're the Jazz to get a deal done. I think you're better off early in the market. And now I think, as we've been talking about for several months here, I think there's no doubt the Jazz are going to have to find a couple of dance partners if they want to make a deal that's going to significantly change and improve the roster as far as athleticism goes, because I just don't see that the Jazz have the pieces. And we've talked about this with Rudy Gobert's contract, Mike Conley's contract. When you're paying that kind of money to guys who do not have, and I want to be careful how I say this. When you pay a guy like Rudy Gobert, who in my opinion is not a championship caliber player, because he's not a well-rounded player. Mm-hmm. I think we've seen that. And when you're paying a guy like Mike Conley luxury tax dollars, it handcuffs you. Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell are the two guys on this team who you can say unequivocally, I can see them winning a championship and being a big part of a reason that a team wins a championship.
Yeah.
Other than that, whether it is Bojan Bogdanovic, whether it is Joe Ingles, Buckets O'Neal, no matter who else you want to talk about on this roster, I don't believe that the Jazz have a lot of value. I don't believe they have a lot of leverage with the guys who are currently, on their cap.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think it makes it tough. I think it puts you in a situation as a club where you kind of are saying to yourself, okay, we've got some nice pieces here that work well together in our situation, but to improve this situation, how do these players fit into, the Indiana Pacers situation, or how does X player fit in on X team? And that's what you have to understand about trades. I think everyone thinks that trades are simply just money. They're not just money. I think there's this other side of the conversation where, again, the Indiana Pacers, for example, the Indiana Pacers don't really have any use for Royce O'Neal. The Indiana Pacers obviously, have history with Bogey, but at the end of the day, you're not going to go out and make some splash move to get a guy unless it makes sense both financially and for your team. And so when I look at the Jazz, I'm like, man, this is a team that I feel like truly is 1 to 2 players away from really being an NBA Finals threat, from being a team that could really run the table here.
Yes.
And so it's just difficult because it's like the carrot dangling in front of you. And I want them to win so bad, but it's just they're in a difficult spot. And the real thing, in some of the media talked about this before the season, that if the Jazz don't do it this year, if they don't win their title this year, it's going to be really difficult for them to really do anything significant for the next couple of seasons because of the luxury tax situation. So that's why there's pressure to do it now.
Yeah, and I also think that when you're talking about the landscape of the NBA, I mean, the West is not going to get easier. It's going to get more difficult. And we've said this for, I feel like 18 months at this point.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at teams like the Golden State Warriors, they're clearly a better basketball team now than they were a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they still haven't gotten James Wiseman and Klay Thompson back, which a lot of people are expecting to happen right around or before Christmas. So they're going to get better. They're going to get more athletic. They're going to get better defensively. And they're already arguably the best team in the NBA. So you're in this difficult spot where you know the LA Lakers are going to make deals. It's not a question of if with the Lakers. It's a question of when they make a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at what they're out talking about, they're not talking about role players. I mean, when you look at the big guy for Indiana whose name just went
Miles Turner.
Miles Turner. They're talking about Miles Turner.
Mm-hmm.
And if you add Miles Turner to that Laker roster, and if you wind up shipping out a guy like a DeAndre Jordan, you know, if you ship out role players off that roster, the Lakers just become exponentially better.
Yeah.
If you add a guy like Miles Turner that truly pushes the Lakers into, you know, hey, we're going to play a point guard, a shooting guard, 2 power forwards, and a center.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be very difficult to deal with because LeBron James has shown you a couple of things. He has massively improved his shot.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing with his back to the basket, and they're not going to sit around and hope that Anthony Davis turns into the stud that he was 2 years ago. Because they're out there, they realize that and everybody called him crazy for doing this.
Yeah.
And this is the issue that we've talked about a lot with the Jazz.
Yeah.
Look at what the Lakers have done. They've accumulated a ton of guys who they don't necessarily need and that have value around the league. And I think this is why you saw them pick up the Nuns, that they've picked up the Bazemores. They've picked up guys that they can move around.
Malik Monk.
They've picked up guys, Avery Bradley.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you look at a guy like a Talon Horton Tucker.
It's a sweepstakes at this point for Talon Horton Tucker. But I think when you are, and I think your point about the Western Conference getting better is really the extra layer to this Jazz conversation that I think, you know, not that I'm trying to exaggerate, but I think it's kind of terrifying if you're a Jazz fan. Think about it. I mean, you don't have a lot of flexibility. You don't have a lot of assets as you know, for the Jazz, like we were just talking about. But on top of that, in addition to you not being really able to make a big time move, you've got the Lakers, the Warriors, the Suns. You know,
the
you
Clippers.
figure the Clippers are a dark horse to make a move of some kind.
And oh, by the way, they're going to add Kawhi Leonard back.
So you start piling these teams on, and you're like, okay, right now the Jazz are sitting in the 3 spot, right? They're the 3 seed in the Western Conference. But the real question is going to be, what does it look like when February, March, April gets here, and these other teams in the Western Conference start to come together? Because what the Jazz have now is their best. Like their roster is not going to change a ton. Like
That's right.
you may see a Bogey deal maybe, or a Joe Ingles deal maybe. But that's a huge question mark if they could get something done.
And I think the Jazz are in a situation where they're going to have to be really creative. And as you've been saying, I think they're going to have to be a third team in a deal.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the way that the conversations are going, I mean, they're trying to get, you know, like, and let's stay on Karis LeVert because that's who we were told they made the inquiry about. What do they have to offer Indiana? That's the real question. And so when you back up, you ask yourself, okay, if the Jazz don't make a deal, which I don't think is an option, I think you have to make a deal. If the Jazz don't make a deal, you're going into the playoffs very much in the same set of circumstances you did last year. The pieces are a little different. I mean, obviously, Rudy Gay brings a different dimension to you,
Mhm.
but does Rudy Gay solve the problems that you had last playoff season? I don't necessarily believe he does. I think obviously he shoots the three very well,
Mhm.
right? So he's an upgrade,
He does bring veteran presence in the
but
postseason, so that
he
helps.
brings you a little bit, but does he really bring
Yeah.
big moment postseason guy? I could
Well,
argue
I
he
don't
does
think he
not.
doesn't bring. I don't think. I'm not saying he brings big moment postseason guy who's going to hit some clutch ass shot for you, but I think that for the Jazz last year, their bench was very lackluster. Their bench got exposed last season. They did not have an answer for a lot of the things that these teams were throwing at them, and so I think the at a minimum, what we can say is that adding just those three players and Rudy Gay, Hassan Whiteside, and Eric Pascal, those three guys at least give Quinn more flexibility.
But what they don't do is address your defensive deficiencies on the wing.
Yeah,
They don't.
yeah.
And that's why I say, like, going back to the Rudy Gobert conversation, is that when you look at the way Rudy impacts a game, that all goes away in the postseason.
Hmm.
It is a very the regular season is great, and this is what we talked about last year. We're talking about it right now because they're the third team in the West. It's great to be good in the regular season, but you need to be elite in the postseason. And the Jazz don't currently, as they are constructed, have the ability to be, in my opinion, to be elite in the postseason because defensively they don't match up with the top teams in the West. And frankly, what we're seeing out of this Utah now is a team that can't keep guards and forwards out of the paint. And so it minimizes the impact that Rudy Gobert has defensively. Because what you're seeing is teams like, and if you look at a Denver, right? That's you're pulling Rudy away from the basket. Okay, well, that's what we have Hassan Whiteside for. But how often have we seen Hassan Whiteside and Rudy Gobert on the floor together?
Rarely, if
Very,
ever.
very rarely.
Yeah.
But what you're more likely to see, and I know this every time I say this, this always pisses off Jazz fans, you're more likely to see Rudy Gay and Hassan Whiteside on the floor together than you are to see Rudy in any of those matchups.
Well, in my opinion, I think that and this is no slight to Rudy Gobert, but I think if we're talking about defensive creativity, defensive flexibility, the ability to switch at a higher rate, like the ability to cover more
to defend
ground,
the pick and roll.
I think that combo of Gay and Whiteside is a more potent combo defensively than just having Rudy and, let's say, Royce on the floor together. Because when you look at Royce O'Neal and you look at Bojan Bogdanovic, those are your two primary wing defenders.
Yes.
And Bogey's first step is slower. I mean, that's not in question. That's not something that's outlandish to say. Everybody agrees with that. And then you look at Royce O'Neal, and yes, Royce O'Neal can play some pretty solid defense for you. But, again, we go back to that Lakers series or even the Memphis series. When you get a superstar on the other team and that other team knows how to get the matchup they want, it doesn't really matter what Royce O'Neal can do. It only matters who your weakest player on the floor is,
Yeah.
and that's the problem.
Well, and I think, again, it's great to be a good regular season team. That's important. Home court advantage. Totally get it. It's meaningless in the playoffs. And the game changes so significantly. It turns into a 1v1 half court game in the postseason.
Yeah.
And it really makes, when you have Terrence Mann attacking Rudy Gobert's chest, that's exactly the issue that the Jazz haven't fixed. That's the issue. And I love that Rudy Gay is here. I mean, I think Hassan Whiteside has been an excellent pickup so far. But how effective will they be in the postseason? And if Rudy Gay and Hassan Whiteside are playing at their highest best use in the postseason, where's Rudy Gobert fit into that picture? Because you can have one or the other. You can't have both. And Rudy is such an important part of your defense that I think it's going to be a real challenge. If you do not change this roster, it is going to be a challenge for the Utah Jazz to improve and make a deep playoff run.
Yeah.
So, and again, I just look at other teams, like other teams have the pieces and the flexibility on their cap to move guys to acquire what ails them.
Well, and you can see what's coming. I mean, if you're the Utah Jazz, you can see what's coming. You can see that a a Kuminga trade for the Warriors
Yes.
there's a high likelihood that they're going to make a move. I mean, there's even been conversations around Wiseman and Miles Turner. So I mean, it's no secret that the Warriors are out here trying to make moves. I know I keep saying this, but it's what goes through my head, which is it's not that the Jazz are some terrible team,
They're not.
but we're again having this conversation of, hey, how good is this team who wants to win a championship? Can they live up to that? And right now, the formula is not quite there. They're very close, but they're just not quite there.
They have got to get. I think they're 2 players away. I think if you can add either one truly elite wing player, and it's probably a 3-and-D type player.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you have a guy in Donovan Mitchell who can carry you.
Yeah.
You have a guy in Mike Conley if you can keep him healthy.
Which they've done a good job of.
That can be a big part of why you're good. But you cannot get around the fact that whether it's Don, Conley, Bogey, I mean, you pick the Jazz, man. They're not good perimeter defense players. They're not. And, I know that everybody seems to get upset when we talk about trading Royce O'Neal. I'm telling you, he's a vanilla average player.
Yeah.
He is, and it's thrilling and awesome to see him hitting threes. That's not what you need Royce O'Neal to do. And we keep talking about this and we keep having these conversations. It's cool that guys like Royce O'Neal are hitting threes. I need him to be a really good wing defender.
Yeah.
Those days are over. It's cool that Joe Ingles can hit threes and give me 20 minutes a night. I need him to be a really good wing defender. Those days are over.
Yeah.
Right? Rudy Gobert is an elite rim protector who doesn't often get to protect the rim, and especially not in the postseason.
Yeah.
Right? We need him, and we see Rudy working on his offensive game. All I need for the Jazz to do to make Rudy Gobert a more impactful player is to get an elite wing defender.
Yes.
When you add a wing defender to this team, Rudy Gobert instantly becomes a better player.
Yeah, because he doesn't have to do as much, and he can guard the rim more.
And he has more freedom. He has more freedom to lean to the weaker side of the floor.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, now you get back up into a top 10 defensive team, a top 5 defensive team.
Yeah.
That's my point. All right, let's get some of your comments in here. Snuka is your first in. Snuka, good morning to you. Always appreciate you being here. Alex T says another Malone Stockton era, no title. I don't know about era, but if you go back to what we were talking about before the Mike Conley signing happened, the Jazz need to suck it up and be bad for a year.
Yeah.
That's if you want to win, and this team has a guy in Donovan Mitchell who's capable of being the centerpiece of a team that wins 3 championships in 5 years. If you want to be a 3-championship team in 5 years, you're going to have to suck for a year.
You have to get your money right.
You have to get your money right.
Yeah.
And I think the hardest part of that is who you're going to say goodbye to. Because Bogey, Jingles, Buckets O'Neal, those guys are not going to be here when this team wins a championship, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think you're going to have a roster overhaul. You can build a team around Donovan Mitchell. You can win a championship with Mike Conley. I think most of the other guys on this team, Eric Pascal's here because him and Donovan Mitchell are friends. Yeah. He's not a championship player.
I don't even think that Rudy is I don't think that it's hard for me to say that Rudy Gobert can't be on a championship team because of what he's capable of doing.
But what he can't be, and I want to make this clear, not to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Rudy Gobert cannot be a foundational part of a championship team.
Yeah, I think he needs to be the back-end defensive guy. That's what he needs to be. He can't be asked to do all these extra things. Like the Suns, like DeAndre Ayton's a perfect example of the opposite player of what Gobert would be. The Suns asked DeAndre Ayton to rim run just the same way the Jazz asked Gobert to rim run. The difference is that DeAndre Ayton is an offensive-minded player, so
Correct.
That's where his strengths lie, and so the Suns often lose on the defensive end. So I think my point here is that with DeAndre Ayton or Jokic or like even an Embiid, like these guys who are more offensive-minded guys, the teams have to get them to work hard defensively, but they're able to make up for that. The problem for Gobert is that because he's defensive-minded and those stats don't, sometimes aren't able to get on the stat sheet, I think that, people just don't see what he's truly capable of. If he had that dynamic wing defender to give him support, he would be a savage, but he's spread way too thin.
Well, and I think the other thing we always come back to on Rudy Gobert is that his big nights are on bad shooting nights for the Jazz.
And that's tough, man.
yeah.
That's tough.
If excuse me, if the Jazz shoot the three well, Rudy doesn't have huge rebound nights. If the Jazz shoot the three well, he doesn't have 25 and 15.
Yeah.
When the Jazz don't shoot well, Rudy Gobert has huge nights because he's an elite rebounder. He understands trajectory. He understands positioning to become a rebounder. Like Rudy Gobert is very good at that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you are asking Rudy Gobert to be a foundational piece, and we talked about this, after the game in Philly the other night, when you are forcing your guys to throw him the ball, which the Jazz are now doing, they are telling, hey, throw him the ball.
Mm-hmm.
When you're forcing that, it's not good for the team. The problem, the best part and the worst part, that's probably the right way to say this. The best part and the worst part of the Utah Jazz is that they live and die with the three ball.
Yeah.
And when they shoot 40 to 50% from three, they're unbeatable.
And it's a beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah, but they're very difficult to beat.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you live by the three, you die by the three.
Yeah, and there's no other way. That's the thing. I think it's a great point. I mean, when they're dying by the three, when we all know those nights as Jazz, fans or admirers, we all know those nights where the Jazz are shooting 20% from three and don't have it going. It's a brutal existence because they don't really have another way to score. I mean, yeah, Don can get to the line, but Joe's not somebody who's driving by you. Bogey, they try to get, a little bit of bogey on the block. They try to start to get things going, but they don't have that guy like the other night, Kevin Durant going for 50. And there was a game before that where they really just fed him because they were behind. Like the Maverick game last week.
Yes.
In the Maverick game,
yes.
the Nets were really struggling, and they just gave it to KD, and he just carried them to victory. The Jazz don't have that guy, with all due respect to Don.
And the problem for Don at this point in his career is now he's becoming an elite three-point shooter.
Mm-hmm.
So people are taking that away from him. And he hasn't developed that. Like, if you think about Steph, it doesn't matter what you try to do. I honestly think the Pacers had 7 guys guarding Steph last night.
Seriously, dude.
But Steph still got his, right? Don isn't developed enough as a three-point artist, if you will, to be able to do that. This team is just a little behind the curve, and they need to improve.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what this comes down to. All right, let's see. Brandon Whiteside says the Lakers have dollar store players. No one wants their trash. Au contraire. Their players may not be good, but they're all on team-friendly contracts. Everybody in that situation, pretty much outside of Russ,
tradable players.
Yeah, they took a ton less money, to go and be an LA Laker and try and win a championship.
You don't think somebody would want Malik Monk after what he's done this season so far?
Oh my God!
There's no denying that people want Talon Horton-Tucker. There's no denying it.
The question is, look at a guy like, and there's a lot of people. Miles Turner's one of them. Another guy that everybody's talking about with the Lakers is Bradley Beal.
Mm-hmm.
If you look
Bradley Beal.
If you look at those guys, and you look at what they bring to the table, what are those teams after? Those teams are not after stud players.
Yeah.
They're looking to rebuild. So for the Lakers need to make numbers work. They've got to make the salaries work because of where they are in the salary cap. So you need fill players. If we're going to give you a Talon Horton-Tucker, you're going to take Kent Bazemore's deal back to make it work,
mm-hmm.
and then you're going to buy out or play out the string on Kent Bazemore.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's a free agent, so next year you have a lot more cap space.
Yeah.
Like, those are the deals the Lakers can make.
But I feel like the Lakers, too, are always that team that are in that situation, so they're really nifty and crafty at figuring those things out. I feel like some teams, and this isn't particular to the Jazz, but I just think they're, if you think about teams that we don't hear a lot about in the trade market, I don't know, let's say Portland, for example. Sometimes they're the third team, but they're not really the team that's out here making a ton of moves. They're not a team that I'd be comfortable saying, yeah, could figure out, a deal real easily.
But look at Ben Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another Laker target, Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
They want Talon Horton-Tucker. The Sixers will trade Ben Simmons to the Lakers if Talon Horton-Tucker's the centerpiece of a deal. And my guess is the Lakers would do that because the Lakers are struggling a bit defensively. They're not as good defensively as they had hoped to be. The problem for the Western Conference is if they get a Ben Simmons, they're going to make another deal.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to make another trade. It's not rocket science. The Lakers have way more flexibility because of the fact, A, they're the Lakers, and B, a bunch of players want to be there. So a guy like a Ben Simmons, and this is the Buddy Hield trade that didn't happen over the summer. Buddy Hield wants to be a Laker. The Kings don't mind trading Buddy Hield to the Lakers.
It's almost a question of who doesn't want to be a Laker, and that's the advantage. And this is definitely something that the Jazz deal with. There's no doubt about it, and it's not unique to the Jazz either. Like I think, if you're a smaller team, you're going to deal with it. It just is what it is.
I think the Cavs are dealing with the fact that a lot of people don't want to play in that organization.
Yeah, the Cavs, like any smaller market team, and so I just think that the Jazz will make a move of some kind. It will happen. To what extent, I'm not sure. I'm not confident. I can't confidently say that they're going to move Bojan Bogdanovic for a stud defensive wing. I don't know. Like, a Thibault from Philly would be ideal. That's the kind of guy you're looking for. But that's a lot of money, and I don't know how that would work out. So the point just is that the Jazz, if you're a Jazz fan, you need to be looking for them to make a move, but you also need to be paying attention to what all these other teams are doing because the Jazz may be the 3 seed right now, but it's not really a question of what seed you are right now, is it?
No,
it's a
not.
question of what seed you are when the playoffs begin. When you play that final game, where are you? The Jazz obviously are not going to be a play-in tournament team, but my point is are they still the 3 seed? Are they a 7 seed? Where are they? That to me is going to be really important.
I think if the Lakers trade Talon Horton-Tucker, if you give a 20-something player, and I can't remember, I think he's 22, 21. If you give a young 20s player, and he's got 2 more years plus an option on his deal, and Talon's got $30 million guaranteed coming, that's a really affordable contract. That's a contract that, if you're looking at like a Ben Simmons, for instance, because we know that Philly wants a young, controllable player.
Yeah.
Philly's
tired of being landlocked.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. I think if you want that, I think that's where Ben Simmons gets moved. If you look at,
but is Ben Simmons a championship player? Like, let's say he did go to the Lakers or maybe the Clippers. Like, is he a guy that you're like, yeah, if you add him for defensive purposes, you're a juggernaut.
But isn't he the same thing as Rudy Gobert?
I don't think he is.
I think for wings, if Ben Simmons was on this Utah Jazz team, we would be having a completely different conversation.
Well, we would. And I guess we're saying the same thing, but we're saying 2 different things as well. Like I don't think that Ben Simmons, number one, is nearly as limited as Rudy is. Like Ben Simmons in the NBA can do a lot more for you than Rudy can. Meaning that Rudy is capable of putting up 25 and 15. We've seen it. He does it pretty, consistently, assuming that he's got enough opportunity on the rebound side of things. But like with Ben Simmons is going to cause trouble for you with the other team's best player.
Yes, he is.
And that's the difference. And I think that, last year, let's say that the Jazz had Ben Simmons last year. Paul George wouldn't have done what Paul George did to this team if Ben Simmons was on this team. And that's kind of my point. The Jazz need that guy.
A wing.
Yeah,
defender.
dude, you need somebody who's you need a 6'6", 6'7" wing defender.
Ben Simmons' best fit is on a team that doesn't need him offensively.
The Utah Jazz.
They don't need him to shoot threes on this team.
No.
The Lakers don't need him to shoot 3. The Lakers need him to defend.
Rebound and play point guard.
Portland, the reason Damian Lillard wants to play with Ben Simmons is because Dame wants the ball, right? Like, I mean, I look at the way Philly's set up, and that Tobias Harris is their highest paid player is crazy to me.
Yeah, it's wild.
But you're just sitting here paying Ben Simmons $30 million a year.
Well, and you weren't,
and
though.
You haven't traded him.
I mean, you were finding him because he wasn't showing up, so he finally decided to start showing up. So you've saved a bit of money. But I just think, listen, man, I just think that, the trade market is going to be crazy this time because, like last year, like the bubble year, there were some moves made, right? But this time
Yeah.
around, it's going to be way deeper, way more aggressive.
And you better watch the Sacramento Kings, because I think the Sacramento Kings with De'Aaron Fox, if you look at Harrison Barnes, if you look at Buddy Hield, who's only making, I say only, $23 million a year.
Yeah, but for a guy his caliber, I mean,
that's a manageable number.
yeah.
That's a manageable number. He's not making, and again, not to keep picking on Rudy Gobert, but he's not making $40 million a year.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, it's a very, very manageable number.
Yeah.
So let's see. James Knight says, I feel you judge Rudy Gobert because of his salary. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I do. You're damn right I do.
That's exactly right.
He's being paid two
He's
times
one of the
more.
highest paid players in the NBA.
He's being paid 2 times more than he should be paid. And that and everyone, the day, let's not forget what we did on the show the day that contract came out. And go back and find it. I really encourage you to. The day that contract got signed, what did we say? This is going to kill them in the trade market. This is going to landlock them. And here we are.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to hate on Rudy specifically, because I totally am down with, hey, as a player, you're worth what you can get paid. All the credit in the world to Rudy Gobert and his agent for getting that contract done. That's a hell of a job by them, number one. But number two, for what was Dennis Lindsey to do this deal, I just don't know what Dennis Lindsey was looking at. I'm not sure what his philosophy was. I don't know what you're thinking. Like, I just don't know what he was looking at. To me, and I'll be honest, back then when it was an option to let Rudy walk, I would have let him walk if he was saying to me, hey, 40 or I'm walking. Okay, we'll see you later.
$42 million more than Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, we will see you later, and we will go and spend that money in the free agent market to get better.
He's in totality, he has $205 million.
Yeah, so he's not a guy you're going to be able to move. Like, not for a while.
And he's 23% of your salary cap, man.
Yeah.
For a guy who gets neutralized in half-court offense.
For a guy that typically is out in the first quarter with 8 minutes left to go. Like, that's how they're playing him right now. And that's why I say, I know everyone's like, oh, well, you guys just hate on Rudy. Well, with all due respect, it's not as though Rudy's coming down on the offensive end and just dominating people. That's not who he is. And again, it's not hate. It's just the situation. You know, like
this is why paying Rudy means that $8.8 million a year to Royce O'Neal is a lot of money.
Yeah, and at least with Mike Conley, I can say, okay, you know, I understand where they're coming from on Mike, kind of. Like, you're already, like, when you made the decision to re-sign Mike Conley and pay the luxury tax, you were saying to yourself, well, there's not much we're going to be able to do with this roster anyway, so we might as well go and get Mike and give it our best shot, you know?
James says, to say he is not a championship caliber player is quite frankly stupid. His defensive value makes up more than adequately for his offensive deficiencies. Only it doesn't.
It doesn't in the postseason.
Because he gets neutralized. All that matters in this game is winning a championship. And for the Utah Jazz, Rudy Gobert was part of the problem last year. He wasn't the solution.
Yeah.
And so we all sit here and we talk about block shots and Rudy. Cool. Those are nice defensive player of the year trophies you have.
Yeah.
I'll take NBA championships instead. And with Rudy Gobert on the roster as it's currently constructed, you're not going to win a championship.
And the thing, the question I have, because we'll have this conversation a million more times, and we'll go round and round, and James and I will call us idiots, and you know, we'll go round and round, and it's fine. This is what we do on the show, right? Like, I'm totally down with it. But at the end of the line here, when we're in Game 6 of the second round against one of the LA teams, and you're down, it's an elimination game for you on the road. Is Rudy Gobert the guy you're going to go to and say, hey, man, win us the game? Before the game, is Quinn Snyder going to Rudy Gobert and saying, hey, man, I need 40 from you tonight?
Yeah, and Bascom Snab, whatever your name is, and by the way, now your comment got filtered because you told us to F off.
That's it, Skippy.
Yeah, you're out of here. But he basically said we're never right about anything. Well, and hey, if that's true, I mean, okay, cool.
We can go. Do you want it?
No, we're not. We're not doing lists on the show of how awesome we are. But I would just remind you, we're awesome and we haven't been really wrong about the Jazz on much, right? I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. And we say this every day. If the Jazz win a championship, is that good for our show?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's really good for our show.
There is no question.
So I'd like to see them win a championship. You know what I'm saying? Ryan Buckley says Jazz aren't trading anyone, LMAO. Okay. Brylark says, what's up, boys? Trade Royce and Joe immediately. Tanner says, I fear the Jazz are peaking too early. I'm a little worried that the Jazz keep playing Conley on back-to-backs. If they keep doing this, Conley will probably get hurt in the playoffs again.
Which is definitely a low-key storyline. No one's talking about it.
Water's
but
wet.
They are.
Water's wet.
Yeah.
And Mike Conley's hurt in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Donovan Mitchell leaves Utah before Utah ever wins a championship, Buckley says.
And that's something that I'm worried about. I truly am, because if you think about the way this plays out, let's assume, and I think it's a safe assumption, all the haters aside and everything, that they're not winning a championship this year, right? So if you don't win a championship this year, one of these next 3 seasons, you're not going to be good. You're like it because of the money. You're going to be forced. It's not a choice. You're going to be forced into being like a 6 to 8 seed. Like that's just going to have to be.
And it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
This team is good enough if you just get into the playoffs.
But my point is with Don and where he's at with things, we saw how things played out with Devin Booker. The only reason Devin Booker is still a Phoenix Sun is because they did a complete 180, overhauled the entire roster, and then, obviously made the NBA Finals appearance where they lost.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's something to pay attention to.
Greg Hawkins says, I'm starting to believe that the Jazz will be sold somewhere else before they get a championship, if it ever happens at all. Ooh, I wouldn't say that. So hard to be a fan of this team year after year.
It is. I feel, and this is something we talk about too. Like, I feel like the Jazz are the ultimate get to the postseason. We're the best. Everything's amazing.
Yep.
Get eliminated.
Yep.
Like,
I don't disagree. Tanner Plummer says, Hawkins, I love the Jazz, but it's extremely difficult to get hype for this team year after year of frustrations. James Knight says, Jazz are the number 1 ranked offense in the league. Are the number 1 ranked offense in the league. Why would they need to force feed Rudy the ball offensively? Nah, we're good. I don't know why they're doing it. I don't know, because it doesn't lead to good things. But you can see, and they have talked about the fact that they're trying to get Rudy the ball more. That Quinn Snyder's talked about getting Rudy the ball more.
The reason they're trying to force feed Rudy Gobert the ball is because when he's a presence inside offensively, which again we don't see often, all hating aside, we just don't see it that much. But when he has those games where the first quarter he's got a couple of dunks and he's got some nice moments, you start to see the looks, the quality of the look from 3 goes up.
Yes.
When Rudy Gobert is effective in the paint.
Because he's actually, by the way, he's actually a decent passer as well.
Yeah, and that's starting. So again, this is why I say it's a double-edged sword. Is Rudy Gobert a gifted offensive player? No, he's not. Is Rudy Gobert ever going to be somebody who is going to be your best offensive player? No, he's not.
No.
But on the flip side of that, the Jazz also exacerbate the situation by not giving him the ball and not really including him. Like Donovan Mitchell won't give him the ball. Like we've been watching this play out, and we just see he won't feed him the ball. He's wide open. Hey, buddy, wide open, standing under the basket, won't give him the ball.
By the way, did you exacerbate last night?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
James Knight, why would they need to force him the ball? I'm telling you now, offense is not the problem for the Jazz.
Yeah.
Defensively, they're not very good at all.
Yeah.
They're not. So, and this is why I say, James, I love talking basketball with you, but you want to focus on these things that the Jazz do really well. And I continue to point this out to people every day, I feel like. Continue to do the things you do well, but you better fix your largest weaknesses, especially in professional sports. If your biggest weakness is your defense, you're not going to win.
Yeah.
In any sport. Baseball, basketball, football, footy, you name it.
Look at football last night. Why'd the Rams win that game? They stopped the run on defense. The first time they played the Cardinals, they got run all over.
Neville93 says, good morning, guys. Trade Joe. James Knight says, mine is Don and Mike. Thanks for the heads up, Tanner. What did Tanner say? James Knight, Tanner said, remember the Jazz had the number 1 offense in the league last year, and look what happened in the playoffs. Minus Don and Mike. It doesn't. So wait, and I just want to get this right. The Jazz lost that game or lost the Clippers series because they couldn't score? Is that what happened? Because maybe, and I know I don't watch Jazz basketball ever, but are you trying to make the argument, James Knight, they lost the Clippers series because they couldn't score?
No, I think the argument he's trying to make is that Mike Conley was hurt and then Don got hurt, and he's saying that if they had those 2 guys, they would have won the series.
Yeah, well,
again, it doesn't matter if you would have had those guys. That's the thing. You can't, that's what happens in professional sports. It doesn't matter if like again, and I'm not trying to be a hard ass about it, but like that's the nature of the
Seriously.
beast. Like if you're not healthy, are we supposed to like are the Clippers supposed to be penalized because
Are we going to put
Mike
the
Conley got
series on
hurt?
hold because Mike Conley got hurt?
And
No.
that's my point, and I can't remember who was just saying it. Sorry, I forgot who said it, but them playing Mike Conley on back to backs recently is
It
concerning.
is concerning.
Like it was great the first month to 6 weeks of the season. You were not playing him on back to
Don't say it.
backs, but then
Don't open up the Jared Butler can. Whoop ass. Don't do it.
I'm
Brylark says the success of the season will solely be determined on what happens at the trade deadline. I agree.
listen, I think that your fate in the postseason is largely sealed already. And what I mean by that is unless Justin Zanuck in this front office works magic and like makes a splash acquisition, like I'm talking about, year in, year out, all-star level player, your fate is probably sealed in the postseason already. And
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but that's just where this team is at.
Yep.
So we'll see.
Tyler P says, however we feel about Gobert, the Jazz are not a playoff team without him. I don't disagree with that. I think
Yeah.
as a regular season player goes, this is why he's in the MVP conversation.
Yeah.
He's top 20 in the MVP conversation. Okay, that's cool. But you don't win championships in, March. You win them in June. And
Yeah.
he has been largely the guy's not a factor in the playoffs. Offensively, defensively, and I shouldn't say he's not a factor. He is a liability in the playoffs. In that Clippers series, Rudy Gobert was a liability.
He was the
by
point
no
of
fault of
weakness.
by no fault of his own.
Yeah.
Rudy Gobert is a liability because the Jazz, and this is the other thing I want to point out about Rudy Gay. Like we all talk about, oh, well, the Jazz have Rudy Gay, they can play small ball. So that means that Rudy Gobert is not going to be on the floor. So are you saying they're better without Rudy Gobert on the floor?
I mean, what would you prefer? Would you so like if we use the Clippers series as an example, would the outcome have been different, all things equal, if it was Hassan at the 5 and Rudy Gay at the 4 versus what they had out there before? I can't definitively say that it would have been a different result.
I again say Rudy's not the problem defensively. The problem defensively is they need better defensive wings.
Yeah.
The Utah Jazz can't keep my grandmother, who's dead and has been so for a decade, in front of them on defense.
Yeah.
And my grandmother has no handle. And she's still dunking all. Never mind, I'll stop. She's dead. Let's see. Whoa, comment dump. Appreciate you. Alex T says, I agree with you guys. The Nye guy says Gobert is fine getting garbage around the rim. Lobs are fine, but please do not give Gobertovich the ball in the post. Okay, Nye guy, I'm with you. James Knight says, hey, I would never call you idiots, Jake. It's just a difference of opinion.
I just think, and I know, I'm not saying that you're attacking us. I was just,
Jeremy Bolton says, good morning, gents and everyone. What's up, Bolton? Where you been?
What's up, buddy?
Tyler P says, Barnes incoming. I'm telling you right now.
See, like, that's a
Harrison
guy.
Barnes is a perfect guy.
Yeah.
Oh, the Jazz don't have the assets to get him.
Yeah.
Because I think Harrison Barnes is going to be one of the hottest commodities on the trade market.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Sacramento Kings, not to be redundant, I think the Kings could have one of the biggest impacts in the trade market. I mean, they've got 3-4 guys that they could move today if they really wanted to.
Yeah.
Jazz ranked fifth defensively. So, but again, when you look at, and this is what Quinn has been talking about. Hey, it's cool that we're X, Y, and Z, but to win, we need the 3-ball to go in.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you look at their defensive ratings, that's all well and good. But you got to keep guys out of the paint.
And by the way, and I'm not trying to penalize the Jazz for winning these games because, frankly, it's great to see them winning and being the 3 seed. But you haven't exactly played a difficult schedule up until this point. So, like, all the, hey, we're 5th in the league defensively and we're a top blah offensive team. Like, none of those, I don't even start looking at that stuff until the new year. Like what are you going to be when in January, when you're playing playoff teams, when you're playing the Suns and the Clippers and the Lakers and the Warriors, when you're playing these teams that you're potentially going to see in the second round of the postseason, because they're gonna win the first round, like they will. The second round is where you start to see quality opposition.
But it's interesting you bring that up. Would you want to see Memphis in a first round series this year? Nah, I'm fine. I don't want to see.
Gritty ass team,
I
dude.
mean, that's a different team now. So the West, continues to get better, and I just say defensively. I mean, Rudy Gobert is never going to be your issue defensively.
Yeah.
I mean, he just isn't. The matchup game, your inability to defend the perimeter is the issue defensively for this team. And so, as we talk about Rudy, I again will say I do think that he is a guy that you cannot count on offensively. I think his offense comes on bad nights for the Jazz shooting,
It comes situationally. It comes
but
by happenstance.
but defensively, Rudy Gobert, when Rudy Gobert struggles defensively, it's not on him. It's because he's trying to defend 5 other guys,
Yeah.
and you're asking him to do too much. That's the best way, and I think it was Tony Jones I heard say this on ESPN 700. That you're asking a great defensive player, an elite defensive player, arguably the best defensive player in the NBA in Rudy Gobert, you're asking him to do too much defensively.